Debbie, if you're in the studio, can you see if we are live? My screen has sort of frozen, so
yeah, bear with
I can't
me.
actually. I pressed the button, but I just need confirmation that it's happened, please. If not, I'll press it again.
Yep, we're live.
Okay, over to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to East Devon District Council's Virtual Audit and Governance Committee on the 28th of January 2021. I am your Chair, Councillor Sam Hawkins. I'd like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. All participants here today are taking part remotely, and as well as being live streamed, this meeting is being recorded. So please bear that in mind throughout, and may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please turn any telephone devices off or to silent. As this committee is dependent on an internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we are not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for details. Please make sure all microphones are muted when you are not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Keep points short and do not repeat points that have already been made, and do not interrupt. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphone, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you have confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hawkins.
Present.
Councillor King.
Present.
Councillor Bailey. Councillor Cagle.
Present.
Councillor Gazzard.
Present.
You're on mute, Steve, but I can see you.
Sorry, present, Chair.
Thank
Amanda.
Councillor Haywood.
Present. Thank you, Amanda.
And Councillor Twiss.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bailey's just joined us, Amanda.
Sorry, Amanda, I'm present.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Amanda, you didn't call my name.
I didn't know you were on the committee, Councillor.
Oh, I'm on the agenda. I'm on the list.
For A&G?
Yes.
Chair, over to you. Is
Thank you.
Councillor Hookway a member of the committee?
He's on the agenda, so I know there was a bit of a shuffle around recently, so I'll take it. We need the numbers.
I do beg your pardon. I beg your pardon, Councillor Hookway.
No problem at all.
Over to you, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 1, public speaking. There are no members of the public registered to speak. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. I am waiting for a hand to appear here from Councillor Cahill.
Well, I'll speak instead.
You may.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yes, I did bring up at the last meeting, I think it was the last full council meeting, that the minutes were recorded as incorrect because there was no record of the proposal made by Councillor Gazzard into a review of the fleet of vehicles belonging to East Devon District Council. Is that correct?
Yeah, I remember that being discussed at the forward plan. Councillor Gazzard, I can see your hand up. Was that to raise the same point?
Yes, Chair. It was proposed by me. I think it was seconded by Councillor Cago, and it was carried. Thank you.
Subject to that being added, I think it was on the point at when we were discussing the forward plan. I did have a quick rewatch of the video. It's at the very last bit. Are we happy otherwise that those minutes are agreed with that to be added? Not added.
Yeah. Yes, I'm happy as long as we get that added in.
If you could just please could you confirm, Chair, what you'd like me to add to that minute then?
Yeah, it was, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe it was that Strata do a review of the internal fleet.
Swap, Robin.
Swap, of course.
It was an
Well,
audit,
they're the right company.
audit of the East Devon District Council's fleet of vehicles and their management and running of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that
So I've
covers
got
it. Amanda, are you happy with that?
Yeah.
I'll just read back what I have. That SWAP do a review of the East Devon fleet.
Management.
Fleet management, I think we'll go with, yeah.
Fleet management. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. On the basis, then I can't see any other hands. I'll take that as we're happy with those minutes, obviously, with that addition. On to item 3, which is apologies.
I have apologies from Councillor Barrow and apologies from Councillor Poot, who might be able to make the meeting, but obviously isn't here at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. On to item 4, declaration of interest. This will be done by roll call.
Councillor Hawkins,
None, thank you.
Councillor King,
None, thank you.
Councillor Bailey,
None, thank you.
Councillor Cagle,
None.
Councillor Gazzard,
None, thank you, Amanda.
Councillor Hayward.
Yes. Could I give a personal, a declaration of a personal interest in respect of agenda item 7, the section 106 SIL internal audit report, simply due to the nature of my employment with 3 East Devon councils who are either recipients of or could be recipients of section 106 SIL, one of whom has made representations along the lines of the observations and recommendations of that report. Thank you.
Councillor Hookway
None, thank you.
and Councillor Twist.
Personal interest, item 9, Strata annual internal audit report. I represent East Devon District Council on the Strata scrutiny panel committee. So that's a personal interest only. Thank you.
In that case, Chair, may I also add that I'm on the Strata Scrutiny Committee as well as Councillor Twist. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amanda, likewise, I am as well.
Okay, I have that. Thank you.
Thank you. On to agenda item number 5, matters of urgency. There are none. Agenda item 6, confidential and exempt items. There are no confidential exempt items which officers recommend should be dealt with this way. And agenda item 7 is the section 106 and SIL internal audit report. I don't know if Alistair, you want to introduce this one, followed by, I think Ed is speaking on it.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I can talk through the structure of the report. Would it be easier if I share my screen just to talk through the report?
Yes, please.
Find it easier.
I'll make you a co-host, Alistair.
Oh, thank you. So hopefully you can all see in front of you the covering report for the SIL 106 internal audit report. Okay, I will just talk you through our report that is on here. So this is the report that we produced, just to give you an idea of what the report's telling you in terms of structure. So in every audit we undertake, we usually give an opinion, an assurance opinion, and that opinion is based on the achievement of the objective of what the audit was set for. So unfortunately, the objective of the audit is further down in the report. So you do have to come down here. So this is what the audit was actually covering. So our assurance is based on that objective and the management of that risk. You may note when I come to present my committee update report that, that when I come to update my committee update report, we also talk on the level of risk and whether there's any high corporate risks I need to make you aware of. So in terms of every audit that we undertake, there is a risk here. We do assess what it would mean inherently, and then how well the controls are working after we've undertaken our work and what it comes out as. So this one's come out as a medium risk. So it's not necessarily an audit that I would be highlighting as a material risk to the authority, even though there are obviously weaknesses in the control environment. In terms of its impact corporately, we didn't deem it to be a high risk audit. So going back to the structure of the report, we prioritise all our recommendations on a priority of 1 to 3. In this audit, there were two priority 2 recommendations and 2 priority 3 recommendations. And again, you will see in our later committee report that I update you on, I would always make you aware of where there has been a limited assurance or no assurance audit. I would make you aware of the priority 1 and 2 recommendations, because obviously they are more important. The conclusion section just gives a narrative of why we've given it limited assurance. So hopefully reading that section will give you a good overview of why we gave it limited assurance. Moving back through the report then, background just gives you some context to where this audit sits within the wider framework of East Devon District Council and where it might appear in corporate or operational risk registers. Some financial information to give context to the volume and value of stuff that's going through. So that would usually be in our reports as well. And then we give a bit more underneath the objective and risks, some more information on the exact scope of the audit, because obviously some of the risks or objectives can be quite wide and might be limited down based on the time available to us on what we can and can't look at under that risk. So that gives kind of an examination of the controls that we looked at. So when we undertake our reviews and write our reports, we obviously put it into this report. This will be presented to management as a draft report. So we outline the summary of our findings and what we found, and we would expect management to then agree in terms of what they're going to do to remedy the situation. And so this is the response from management and the manager that's going to be responsible for it, and the time frame that we expect that to be implemented by. So in terms of doing a follow-up audit on limited or no assurance audits, we would be looking at these timescales to see, well, is this within kind of 6 months when we'd be looking to do a follow-up to make sure that we can give assurance back to this committee that those recommendations have been implemented. And then the final aspect on our report, when you get down, is the assurance framework definition. So this just gives you some context in terms of where we are. So as I mentioned, we have 3 priorities on our recommendation. The most important ones are priority 1, and as we say, they're quite fundamental, so you wouldn't usually expect many priority 1 recommendations to be out there if things are working effectively. Priority 2 findings are important and can mean that the achievement of the objectives isn't achieved, or is undermined, so hence they're quite important. And then priority 3 recommendations, you might find more of those in maybe a reasonable substantial audit where there are some things that just requires some attention, but doesn't mean that overall objective of the audit isn't going to be achieved. And as I mentioned to you, the risk scoring as well, that's our risk scoring. So anything that returns a high risk after we've tested the controls, those are the things I would highlight to you in terms of major things that need to be corrected pretty quick. I'm not aware of any major risks that I've brought to your attention recently. I think the last one was probably over 12 months ago around GDPR. Okay, so that's the basic structure of the report. I'm happy to hand over, if that's okay, to Ed if he wants to add any further comments on action on the recommendations.
Thanks, Alistair. Ed, did you want to come in and respond, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, happy to just quickly talk you through the key issues and actions highlighted in the report. You'll see in the conclusion section, actually, just for some context, it's worth noting that as members will probably be aware, we've been in the process of introducing XCOM system for some time. It's proved to be a bigger task and more time-consuming and resource-intensive task than we realised, I suppose, and having made significant progress in the early days with 2 temporary officers in to support the Section 106 monitoring officer when they left us, we've been trying to complete the project and get it over the line with the resources that we've got, which has proved challenging, and with the additional challenge of her being seconded into the community hub last year to support the effort in response to the pandemic, which has further delayed progress. So that's a recurring theme, I think, through the audit is to staff resources and the limitations that's placed on progress in terms of this. So just to go through the key issues identified, I think issue 1 relates to outstanding actions on the XCOM system. And you'll note from the audit, it refers to well over 1,000 outstanding actions. It's worth, just for context, to note that these are actions that have been input into the system as we've put on each agreement into the system. And so some of them are quite significant actions, some of them are very insignificant and are just administrative processes to check something is correct or update records. So just for context, for example, of those 1,200 actions, 770 of them relate to local land charges needing to remove an agreement off their system so that it no longer shows on searches. So that's a relatively minor administrative process. Perhaps more significant is, I think, 7% of the actions relate to payments needed to be invoiced or chased in relation to Section 106 agreements. So those are perhaps the more significant actions of concern that clearly we need to get on top of quickly. In terms of the reason for that, I think the audit highlights the staff resources issue that I've mentioned, and the action that's been agreed is to review those resources and identify an additional staff resource and bring that in by April 2021. Just by way of an update, since the report was drafted, we have reviewed that situation and developed a job description and person spec for an additional temporary full-time post for 6 months to be appointed to enable us to complete the project and get the system completely up to date. We are currently out to recruit that post and hope to have some applicants to consider shortly. So we are well on track to appoint that post by April. In terms of the second issue highlighted, relates to not all demands having been raised in a timely fashion and a recovery process being ineffective. As it says, that there's over £400,000 worth potentially requiring securing through 106 agreements, and the action is to use the XCOM system to track and recover those processes. Again, this relates to staff resources being brought in to enable us to do that, but I think we are on track to achieve that, as I've said. Issue 3 relates to the participatory budgeting guide, which was found to be out of date. We're in the process, well, we have effectively redrafted the guidance to go on the website and are just reviewing and tidying up that text ready for that to go live in the next few days. So we should be on track to have that online by the end of this month, as the audit suggests as an action. And the final issue, issue 4, relates to town and parish councils not being advised of how much Section 106 money has been collected. And the key action is for the introduction of the public-facing module, which is part of the XCOM system. So obviously this is dependent on the system being up to date to enable this to happen. Since the audit has been undertaken, we've been busy getting all of the agreements on the system, so they are now all on the system. There is a need for some final reconciliation between the records and finance records, which is we hope to have completed in the next couple of weeks. And then we'll be able to put the public-facing module live. I should say the public-facing module has been operating in a test system for a number of months now, so we're confident that that is fit for purpose and ready to go, and Strata are just waiting for the word from us to say that the information is accurate and correct and can go live. So we should be well on target for that to happen before the end of March this year, as per the agreed action in the audit. So I think that's the key highlights and actions and where we are at the moment. Hopefully that's a helpful introduction. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Happy to take comments from outside the committee first, please. Otherwise, I'll bring it in. No, on that basis, then, Councillor Gazzard, please. Oh,
sorry. Thank you, Chair. It's just a request from me. I'm having extreme problems with my eyes this afternoon, and although I have a large print copy, could somebody just identify for me which page the recommendations are on, please? Because I'm struggling to find them. So if someone could help me with that, I'd much appreciate it. Thank you.
So in respect of this item, it's the page 7 is the sort of covering page report, recommending to members that we consider the findings and recommendations of the attached report and management of the receipt and expenditure of the section 106 and SIL contributions. And then you've got the accompanying swap report titled the section 106 SIL compliance.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Perfect. No worries. Councillor Arnott, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, as you'll note on page 3 of the SWOT report, that you're here today is my fault, really. Sorry about that. But I did think it was important that this was brought forward, this analysis, which I welcome hugely. I had a small amount of interaction with the personnel from SWOT who were fantastic. And I think because they had engagement with members as well as officers, I think it led to a greatly improved outcome for this report. It does worry me, Chair, that if I hadn't asked for this to be brought forward, where would we now be? We'd be rolling on another 6 months, maybe a year, without any action having been taken. I understand this matter will probably come to scrutiny, so perhaps I won't sort of waste too much of your time talking about the past. But the context is that none of us probably who sit on town and parish councils haven't been aware for years, certainly since 2007 in my case in Collerton, that there's been a consistent degree of confusion about what communities have got to spend and where the money is. And what has always been puzzling, and in a way it's great that we've now got the Excom thing and that we're going to have a public facing interface and we'll probably have a dashboard of some kind, but this really was something that just could have been kept on a ledger. I mean, I defer to your experience, Chair, really. It would have been very easy to have a old-fashioned massive ledger with the name of a town, the name of a development, the name of how much is due, has it been paid, has it been spent, what's it been spent on? So I just don't understand why this was so complicated for so long. I mean, for many, many years, a decade at least. And I think what has happened is that has had a reputational effect on this council, because you see, we can't take town and parish councillors for granted. They're the people who are going to be nearest to their communities when this money eventually gets spent. And they haven't been able to access the information easily over a period of years. They haven't quite often been able to receive return emails or phone calls or anything from East Devon either. So the other difficulty with this area with S106, as we know, is that it's often the mitigation, isn't it, for a controversial planning application. You think, oh, well, nobody wants this one, but there's again the S106. Now, what I can't understand is why East Devon have quite rightly put so much effort into making sure a planning application goes through, and if there are conditions on it, that those are then examined and building control comes in afterwards and whatever. That side of the equation, working with the builders and developers, seems to have been done very well. But the other side of the equation about S106 just seems to have been neglected and understaffed, seriously understaffed. And so it's very welcome that SWAP have identified this need for extra staffing on this, which Cabinet agreed to the other day, and glad that it's before you for consideration here today as well. So yes, we do need to move forward from here, but I think we also have to bear in mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chair, I believe we charge a 5% overhead for this. Well, you know, not much of a service, was it, for many years? And if this was in the private sector, I think there'd be some serious criticism about what has been allowed to go on, you know, for many years here. And then finally, as I said, probably these matters are matters for scrutiny. I'm delighted it's come here today and look forward very much to hear what everybody else says. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm just going to piggyback slightly on the point you just made there, and highlight, I think it is mentioned in the report as well, that management were aware of these issues as well, which is good in the way we knew what was going on, but bad in the way that it kind of means it wasn't addressed. On to Councillor Cahill, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, a lot of people find it difficult to understand and determine the exact definition of the titles of the Section 106 and SIL monies and what they're defined for. And in a lot of cases, I believe I'm right in understanding Section 106 is for sport, play and open space, and SIL is for community infrastructure. Now, when I spoke to the SIL officer the other day and asked her to clearly define for me what was meant by community infrastructure, she used an example of a boat with plants in down on Marine Way, as community infrastructure would be the boat, but you wouldn't be able to get the money for the plants. Well, that may have been her interpretation of a definition, but for me, that wasn't a clear definition. And likewise, when we look at Section 106 and we call it sport, play and open space, sports these days can sometimes be determined inside a building. So, for example, a judo club or a boxing club, and if they so wanted to try and apply for money for their sport, I understood that Section 106, they couldn't actually apply for money to build a new building. And likewise, it couldn't be applied for through SIL because it's not community infrastructure. Can someone just give me clearer definitions on exact, or is it something that we can look at and give clearer definitions to the public, so when they're actually applying for monies, they can get it right from the outset, and instead of being told, well, you can have money because it's not for this, they know the clear definitions. Would that be appropriate, Chair?
Thank you, Councillor Cahill. Ed, did you want to respond on those couple of points there, or do you want me to carry on asking others and give you a chance to?
I have got another question, Mike.
I'm happy to come back now if it's helpful. Perhaps if we start with Councillor Cahill's point, because it's quite fundamental to this, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think part of the confusion arises because the role of Section 106 agreements has changed over time. So it used to be that it was our only mechanism to secure contributions towards infrastructure, so everything was Section 106. And then with the introduction of SIL, that changed, and SIL was a payment towards, shall we say, common infrastructure. Infrastructure that was away from the application site itself, and Section 106 is now used just to secure infrastructure on the development site itself. SIL is usually used to secure open space provision if it's on the development site, or affordable housing where that's on the application site, and SIL would now be used to make payment towards wider infrastructure where a number of developments are contributing to the same piece of infrastructure. So probably the easiest way to think of it nowadays is that Section 106 is for infrastructure being provided on the site, and SIL for infrastructure being provided off-site. But as I say, the confusion arises partly because we've obviously got historic Section 106 agreements that predate the introduction of SIL, and therefore we're still spending 106 monies that were collected under the old system. So we've got this transition at the moment, but hopefully that perhaps helps to clarify things.
Right. Could I come back to you, Mr. Freeman, on that?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, well, this authority recently put out a press release about the allocation of Section 106 money after a public vote. Well, it's certainly not on a development area. One's the Exmouth Community College, and the other one is that's also not on a development area. So I don't really understand what you're saying, that Section 106 is designed for sport, play and open space on a development area. It's actually being spent in the town or in any village, not necessarily on the development area. So once again, I'm looking for a clear clarification of definition.
so through you, Chairman, the latest spend in terms of Exmouth, which I think is what you're referring to in the community votes there, related primarily to monies collected under the old system. So that was Section 106 monies collected towards common infrastructure across the town as a whole. So I think that's where the confusion arises, whereas nowadays the new Section 106 agreements we enter into relate to infrastructure being delivered on the development site itself. And obviously we've got the SIL proportion coming through separately, which is for common infrastructure.
Well, could I ask then, through the chair, Mr. Freeman, that we have clear written definition issued out to all the local councils, parish councils, town councils, giving them a clear and definitive understanding of the rules. So there's no confusion or no misclarification of what they're actually allocating money to.
If I might jump in on that, I think that could be a useful part where the participatory budget guide is also being drawn up. I sense that's where they'll first start to look. So I don't know, I haven't seen the draft, so I don't know if it's already included in there, but if not, I'll suggest maybe it should be. Just help tidy up for those local councils.
I think
Yes,
that'd be a good
Chairman,
idea.
happy to check and make sure that's included.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, you had another point, didn't you, Councillor?
I have
Cahill?
a second question. Yeah, can Mr. Freeman tell us how much has been lost to how much money has been lost due to not being collected from developers?
Through you, Chairman, and as I think the swap audit says, we haven't lost any money. This is about how quickly, in some cases, we may have invoiced for it and received the money, but we haven't lost any money.
Hey, can I touch on that point as well? These monies, some of them have been hanging around for 10 years plus. Presume, were they index linked? Because obviously there's a real time value of money, and a pound today is not worth what a pound was worth 10 years ago.
Yes, so all the monies collected are index linked through the Section 106 agreement, so there is no monetary loss in real terms in terms of the delay in some cases of collecting the monies. It's all index linked, yes.
But once we've collected the money, we can't surely go back to the developer and go, we didn't spend your money 10 years ago. Can we have a bit more money now to top it back up to what it would have been if it was index linked?
No, once we've collected the money, clearly its value is fixed, shall we say? But let's say I think that there is some money obviously held in the system that is waiting spend, but without the resources to engage with the community through our participatory budgeting process. Unfortunately, some money will be held for some time while that's organised, and that can happen.
Okay, so there has been a loss of purchasing power for as opposed to actual money. Move on to Councillor Twist, please.
Chairman, thank you. I'll just turn my camera on just to explain that. I don't have fantastic bandwidth today. I'm literally just in the middle of installing a new network, so do bear with me. Section 106 and SIL, it's not new. There has been reporting coming to the council for many years, but it's definitely been something of a dark art, and I have always struggled to try and get my head around it. So goodness only knows how the parish council and man in the street, woman in the street understands it. So I welcome this report because it's in a clear and easy to understand format in the main, but in that respect I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, looking at page 4, at the top we've got the project dashboard shows the following: Section 106 potential 40 million quid, collected 20,695,000. So my brain says 40 million quid potentially would perhaps indicate these are historic Section 106 agreements, because generally the new style Section 106 tends to relate more to play areas, sporting pitches, that kind of thing. So I'm quite interested as to why we've still got quite a lump of money, almost half of it on section 106 outstanding. And I presume that the available 11,158,000 is because the sites which are subject to those 106 agreements are still in the process of being built. So that was just one for clarification. If I then go to page 12, my other question, it's a funny one, this, overages. It's interesting for me because it's a kind of indexation in some ways. I know that's probably the wrong word, but the more successful a site is when it's being developed, if we've been smart enough, our lawyers, to build in an overage clause, the taxpayers of East Devon stand to benefit from that significantly. So really my question is, on page 4, where we've got the term potential, are overages built into that? And if they aren't, has there any modelling been done, perhaps on the back of a fag packet, because I know it can't be an exact science, really, as to what potentially we could gain additionally in either SIL or section 106 as a result of a development being particularly successful? So those are my 2 questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ed, are you best placed to respond on those?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So yes, the potential amount is what we would receive if all the planning consents that have a Section 106 agreement linked to them were to be fully implemented. So it's a hypothetical amount because not all developments that get planning permission are actually built. So some of that money we will never see. Some of it is money that we will receive in time when those developments come forward and reach the relevant trigger points to make those payments, which is why there's obviously a substantial sum still to be potentially received. So hopefully that answers the first point. In terms of the second point, in terms of overage, no, that's not included in the potential amount because we have no way of estimating what, if any, overage we will get from developments. So any overage would be over and above that potential amount.
Thank you for that, Ed. If I may just come back, Chair, on that for a moment.
Yep.
Actually, the supplementary question. Is it now, Ed, standard practice to actually include an overage clause? Because I know until relatively recently, when I say that, I mean the weeks tend to spread into years, so I can't recall. But until relatively recently, overages weren't necessarily included. And it came as a marvel to me that if we were smart enough to actually build those overage clauses into agreements, we did stand to perhaps have the wool pulled less over our eyes, which is an unkind way of putting it when talking about a developer or two. But it's just something that I'm particularly interested in because I'm pretty sure that we do have potential to bring a load more money in as a result of that, particularly the way the housing market looks to be at the moment. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Ed, do you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So I think we've had a policy on overage for about 4 years now, and it means that we apply an overage clause to any Section 106 agreement where the developer is not meeting our full policy requirements. So it would be unreasonable to do it in every case, because if the developer is meeting our requirements, we don't need an overage clause. But where they are not, we will impose an overage clause, other than there's probably been 1 or 2 exceptional occasions where planning committee have resolved that an overage clause is not necessary for particular circumstances, but certainly in the vast majority of cases where our policy requirements are not being met, an overage clause will be put in place.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Mr. Freeman. That's extremely helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Councillor Gazzard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of questions to Mr. Freeman. But I suppose, first of all, Chair, I should declare an interest, personal interest, that I'm a member that sits on the Exmouth Town Council S106 stroke SIL working party. My understanding was that with S106 agreements, we used to have, or East Devon used to have a system, and this is probably what we're talking about, where all agreements were red flagged, so that when we were getting near to the date that that money was going to be expire, that there was a red flag would come up, and town and parish councils would be advised about that. So, I mean, I assume that that red flag system doesn't work now. The problem with S106 is that, unfortunately, with the COVID situation that we find ourselves in, we've lost a good officer that's got her teeth into S106 and SIL that's been transferred over to COVID, and fully understand that. And I would be very supportive of taking on another individual, but I would prefer that that individual would be transferred, if you like, to the COVID and bring the individual back into the S106. But with S106, I believe that there used to be a time period on there from when it was collected to when it was going to be used. Has there been any of that money that has been lost? And I know in the report it says no, but I'm just wondering whether actually we have lost money because it's run out of date. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed, are you happy to respond?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So I think the red flag system would have been something in the previous system, which I actually meant to, in responding to Councillor Arnott's comments, is just to say that prior to XCOM, there was a system for recording all of this information on a series of spreadsheets. So it's not that we didn't have a system prior to this, it's that the XCOM system will be a far superior system once we get it completely up to speed and give complete transparency through this public-facing module. So it's not a red flag system as such, but XCOM does flag up, obviously, when timescales for which money needs to be spent. And historically, some of the old agreements did have timescales that said, you know, once we've received the money, it has to be spent within 5 years. What's tended to happen on more recent agreements is that the clauses have read that a project has to be allocated for the spend of the money within a period of time, not necessarily that the money actually has to be spent. Which is much easier to do, obviously. So I don't think there are any money sat in the system where a project hasn't been allocated within good time, or we're not well on track to doing that. So there is no real risk of us losing monies as a result of that, and we haven't lost any monies because of that. We were always prioritising the spend of the monies to ensure that we didn't have to hand any back. The other thing to note is we were only ever required to hand money back when it was overdue and requested by the developer. So even when that did happen, it wasn't an automatic return. But the simple answer is we haven't returned any money for many, many years, and there is no risk of that happening. In fact, I think there is only one case ever where money was handed back, which Councillor Maddie Chapman reminded me of some years ago, and was about 10 or 12 years ago. I think that happened and was a relatively small amount. In terms of the Section 106 monitoring officer, I would just clarify that while she was seconded into the community hub to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic for a period last year, that is no longer the case. She is back working on Section 106 work, and has been for the last 3 months, I think, off the top of my head, which is why we've made progress since the SWAP report was drafted on these issues, and continue to make progress to get this project over the line. Thank you.
Can I, through you, Chair, just thank Ed for that clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed, just touching back on the Section 106 officer, I'm just aware that obviously it's been highlighted really that we've had a single point of failure with only having one trained officer. I know that we've looking to get this temporary placement in, but only for 6 months. So to me, that reads as though then we're back to only having one individual. Is there a plan to at least make sure there are others trained in this area just to make sure that we don't have this issue. Obviously, there are other circumstances that could cause an individual not to be available for this outside of pandemics.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So it's worth saying that the Section 106 officer isn't the only one who knows how to use this XCOM system. The SIL officer also uses that same system. And we do have a member of our admin team who was also trained in the past on the system and is currently also helping out, which is helping to refamiliarise herself with the system. So we're trying to ensure there's more resilience, shall we say, in that area of work, so that we're not entirely reliant on the one person in terms of the Section 106 officer. But it is worth saying that obviously there's an element of how much money do we spend on staff resources, because that's taking money away from money that could be spent on infrastructure. And while I think the SWOT report refers to monies that specifically for administration, there isn't a huge pot of money there for spend on this, because that money also has, aside from funding the SIL officer and the Section 106 officer, also has to fund the software and licenses for that and the maintenance of that over time. So while we do have some money and that can fund this additional post for the next 6 months, we'll exhaust that money in that time frame. So to have a permanent or more staff resource would be a draw on the main council's budget in order to achieve that in the long term. The other thing to say is that in terms of capacity within the team, I'm confident that once we get this project over the line and get the XCOM system fully up to date and the public facing module online, the workload will be manageable by our Section 106 officer on her own, and there won't be a need for ongoing additional resource. But obviously, if there is, then I would be the first to come to members and ask that we address that issue. But hopefully I'm right, and when we get the system completely up to date and working properly, the situation will be manageable with the resources we have.
Thank you. Councillor Hayward, please.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from other members' observations, I'd just like to share with yourself and the other members of the committee and any members of the public watching and officers, just some observations of my own from my professional role as a clerk to parish councils, where I've had 5 years of dealing with Section 106 and SIL. And it's just to sort of lay down from an outside perspective looking in, the exasperations and frustrations with the system as they were, hopefully no longer, but as they were. So in terms of overages, in July last year, no, July 2019, so just after the last election when I became a councillor, I raised the issue of overages with the then leader of the council, Councillor Ingham. And I didn't get a very positive response, but I then pressed the issue and got another one. And at the time, I raised the fact that overages are only as good as the pool of resource you have to get one over, or rather be a better accountant than the developers. Because, you know, essentially you're saying if you make more profit on this development than you thought, you will pay us a sum. And that's the point of overages. You know, the more successful you are, Councillor Twiss alluded to it. But of course, we know from bitter experience that developers will do everything in their power to lawfully minimise their obligations. And we see this from their viability reports. You know, we think we're going to get something, and then a viability reassessment is done. Suddenly the community, which has had all this development and all the other things, receives no mitigation because it's viabilitied away. And I think the same is true with overages. Unless you have some forensic accountants who are absolute bloodhounds when it comes to going through the data, and we've seen from recent issues in the last couple of months, and Mr. Freeman's alluded to it, that we've asked for information and the other side, and you'll be aware of this, Councillor Hawkins, has said, no, I'm not going to give it to you. So if we're in a position that in order to get overage payments, we have to ask for that information, and the other party says, I'm not going to tell you, then essentially, what's the point of an overage agreement? We'll never see any money. And the fact that we've had no money from these payouts, I'd like this to be something we focus on as to how we apply them, how we enforce them, and the resource we can put to it to make sure we find out and that, you know, we're not hoodwinked, because otherwise it's a pointless exercise. You might as well just not ask. So touching on Councillor Cagill's point earlier about the definition of 106. So using a couple of pertinent examples, in Newton Poppleford, we have a lovely new play gazebo, the wooden gazebo in our play area. And thanks to the creativity, and Councillor Twiss alluded to this also, the creativity of the Section 106 officer, that was built using Section 106 money, which came from a sports pot, because you can sit in it and watch sports on the field. It came from a play pot, because it's in a play park. And it came from open space and recreation, because teenagers who are neither sporting nor playing are actually getting some benefit from it. So it's amazing. So bit of creative accounting, and it was achieved. But the issue with that is I joined the council in 2017. That project, I think, had come on board in 2015, and the local kids were asked, what do you want? And they said, hey, a gazebo. And it was delivered in 2019. So it took 4 years of wrangling, and I was very pleased when it was built, but that's a frustration of parish councils. There's also the frustration that, especially for the smaller parishes, when a Section 106 agreement or a project is identified, approved, vetted, double checked, and finally gets the go ahead, the parish and town councils often have to pay up front. Now, a lot of them have not got a lot of reserves. So if they've happened to had a whopping great Section 106 payment allocated to them, they get the project done, they've got to pay for it up front and then reclaim by invoice from the district council. Now, I appreciate when you're talking about the multi-100,000 projects, the district council will step in and they'll do all the accounting there. But for the smaller ones, the parish council has to spend the money from its reserves and then claim it back. Well, of course, the issue is always, what if they don't have reserves? You know, if they've got a £20,000 project and they don't have £20,000 in the bank, they can't spend that money. They can't, you know, it's not easy for parish councils to run overdrafts. So I think that's something that I'd like to see considered as to how that process is done. Whether the district council is always the agent and it deals with the finances, that's something else to look at. In terms of the wider issue, so SIL especially, so up till recently, when SIL was launched, I had a discussion as a clerk with the Section 106 officer, and Councillor Cagill said the issue, the story about the boat and the plants. Well, the version I heard was that if a community got 20 new houses, let's say, the SIL money generated could buy football kit for the children in those 20 houses, but it couldn't buy football kit for the remainder of the kids who were running around in threadbare kit, which of course seems a bit bizarre because, you know, everyone needs it. But thankfully, thanks to government changes, that's been done away with. And 2 of my parishes have actually successfully spent their SIL. Thank you very much. They put it to good use. So I think this report is to be welcomed. It hopefully will take us forward and allow us to get more community infrastructure and projects done, because that's all people want. You know, you get the housing, this is mitigation. And if the people of our parishes and towns and communities see facilities being delivered, they'll be quite happy, not all of them, but a lot of them, as mitigation for that development. But it's a process that up till now has been quite clunky, and I understand that's procedural, a lot of rules laid down that we just have to abide by as a district council. But hopefully moving forward, it's going to be a lot easier, a lot clearer, a lot more transparent with that public facing issue. So yes, that's to be applauded. So from all the parish councils, I don't represent them all, but I'll, you know, speak hopefully for all the clerks. Thank you very much for getting to this point. They will appreciate it greatly, and lots more community facilities will be installed. My final question, Chair, through you, if I may, to Simon, just for clarity, is on page 4 of the report, where it makes reference to the 11 million of Section 106 available. Just for clarity, for those watching and anyone reviewing afterwards, is that we have 11 million pounds in the bank in a, open quotes, Section 106 bank account? Or is that a theoretical figure? Because I know that when you look at the bar chart of money spent over the period, there's a lot of money on administration, a fair bit on mitigation, habitat mitigation, but in some years the actual spend on projects is very low. And I think it's a public perception issue. If we have 11 million quid in the bank, I'm pretty sure the communities of East Devon would say, actually, we'd like that 11 million pound taken out of the bank account and converted into community facilities, infrastructure facilities, etc. So if I could ask for clarity on that. There is one final point, sorry, Chair, it just popped in my head on that subject. It's the basis of how Section 106 agreements are drafted. I appreciate the officer has got a lot of experience and has done an awful lot, but again, coming back to Newton Poppleford, we have a current Section 106 agreement, which we are desperately trying to spend, I think about £5,000 on play facilities. The money has to be spent within, I think, 500 metres, to answer Councillor Cagill's earlier point, of where the development happened. So I am anxiously looking for a play project within 500 metres of point X, draw a big circle around it. Unfortunately, from my research, there's 2 children within 500 metres of point X and nowhere to build that play facility. So we are being creative. I take my hat off to the Section 106 officer. She's been incredible in trying to find a project that will legally tick that play box, and creativity comes into it as to find a project that does. But it just strikes me that sometimes when you draft that agreement, perhaps a little bit more insight from the community, because if there are no children, you know, within 500 metres, and I appreciate there could be grandchildren, there could be visiting children, but sometimes perhaps another 106 agreement that is more easily deliverable would be better. But I appreciate, you know, I don't have the technical expertise of the 106 officer, so I'm sure there was a reason. But again, it's public perception. People just want the facilities. They don't want money sitting in the bank account. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I've gone on a bit.
Thank you. Ed, there's obviously several points there for you to go over, and then Simon on the financial point, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So yes, if I just go back to overage clauses and go through in order, I mean, I should say in terms of the overage clauses, because they're written into the Section 106 agreement, the developer actually has a legal requirement to provide that information to us. So if they don't, there's legal action. We have legal recourse through that Section 106 agreement to secure that money or prosecute them for not providing it. So we can secure the money. I think the case arises more often at the other end, where we're just dealing with the planning application and trying to get the correct information to demonstrate their viability argument at that stage. But we do, of course, have the ultimate recourse at that stage of refusing the application if they don't provide the information if we want to. But obviously, sometimes, as in the scenario most recently, there might be other reasons why we would accept those arguments, with them perhaps not being as fully evidenced as we might like. In terms of staff resource to then deal with those viability appraisals and information that comes in off the back of overage clauses, we did, I think, about 2 years ago now, appoint a RICS surveyor and valuer into my team to help us with that work in terms of assessing the viability appraisals that were coming through. And indeed, those that come through off the back of overage clauses, and help more broadly within the service about considering development viability issues, so that we try and ensure in the future, for example, through the next local plan, when we allocate sites, there's greater consideration of their viability when we allocate those sites, to ensure that we can deliver all of the infrastructure that's needed to support them. So we have that role and expertise within our team, and he can also call upon additional support from Plymouth City Council, who have a broader team of about 3 officers, I think, doing similar work, that we have an arrangement with them where we can call upon them. So I'm confident that we do have the expertise in-house or on call to deal with that information and scrutinise it to the nth degree to ensure that we're extracting any monies that should be coming to us to support infrastructure in the district. In terms of the time it takes to spend money, that has certainly been an issue in recent years because of resource limitations. And it's not just the resource within my team and the time of the Section 106 monitoring officer, but also the council's engagement officer, community engagement officer, sorry, is also involved in terms of the consultation work that takes place on that. And obviously, her time is spread across a number of council initiatives in terms of consultation, and also often the work of the engineers in the street scene team, where proposals are to deliver play or sports facilities on council land. So there are quite a number of officers involved and issues that can crop up that cause delay and issues with that process. As well as, of course, the role of the town and parish councils, who I'm sure Councillor Hay would agree often have resource issues of their own in terms of progressing these things. So it's everybody doing the best they can with the resources that we have. I know that Scrutiny Committee are looking, I think next week, at scoping out a piece of work, potentially looking at this process of spend and the participatory budgeting process. And it also forms a proposal on the organisational development service plan to look at that process as well. So hopefully in the near future we can look at how that process works and see how we can ensure that that works better in the future for all parties. In terms of the issue about the distance in which the money would need to be spent, this 500 metres of development that Councillor Hayward referred to, the reason for that is that particularly when it comes to play areas, and there's a need to ensure that the infrastructure that's being delivered does offset the impact of the development. And so we have requirements that those facilities are located within easy walking distance of the developments that the need arises for that piece of infrastructure, hence the 500 metres or 400 metre distance, because that's considered to be an easy walking distance for a parent and child to go to a play area like that. It does cause issues, you're right, in terms of implementing that, and does stretch our innovation skills, shall we say, in terms of trying to make best use of that money. I think the problem is, though, that it would be difficult, if not impossible, under the legislation to collect money where we can't show a direct link between how we're spending that money and needs arising from the development. So it's often have the money and be limited like that, or not have the money at all. Really, there's not really an option to then say, well, we'll spend it much further away from the site than that, because it won't benefit the development that's paying towards that piece of infrastructure. In terms of the 11 million and its availability, I'm sure Simon may have something to add on that. I would have to check exactly what we mean by available in terms of that table that's in the report. But it's that sum may well include monies that are not necessarily coming to us, because we have Section 106 agreements that collect money for Devon County Council. So we often are collecting millions of pounds towards education, for example, or highway improvement schemes that we then hand over to Devon County Council. So I don't know if that's included in that amount, or whether that is accurately entirely money that's coming to us. I suspect it's not. I suspect it includes money we're collecting for others, which is why that figure is higher than other figures you may have seen. Certainly, I think the point is, obviously, we don't want money sat in the bank for long periods of time when it's collected for infrastructure. As the chairman has said, its buying power is diminishing over time once we've received it. And obviously, we don't want money sat there that could be doing good in terms of delivering infrastructure in the community. I think this comes back to resourcing issues and that spend process. and trying to get that resolved. Obviously, as I said, we're looking at some additional resource in my team in the short term to try and help with that. And if we review the spend process, then hopefully we can speed up our ability to spend that money over time through that review process and make sure that that money that's held is being spent as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Simon, did you want to address the other points?
I think the only other point was the question of the 11 million on page 4 of the agenda, and I haven't anything to add further than what Ed Freeman has highlighted. I think that 11 million does include sums held for other authorities as well, such as education, transport, but I wouldn't want to mislead committee. I need to check on that and I will report back.
Thank you. So I'm just touching on the point with the figures. Is there a risk that our accounts are misstated in some way if the information is not fully up to date?
Obviously, this is a point that concerns me regarding on the financial side and the account side. So no, not in terms of, we've become out of date in recent months in terms of billing. That's what's been highlighted in the swap audit report. So in terms of the accounts, it won't be material, but at the moment we'll have the sums recorded in potential in the accounts rather than a debtor as in due. So it's just a switch between the two. And because in potential is, as you can see, a significant sum, the amounts of money of switching between potential and billed will be very small. So in terms of accounts materiality, no concern. What, as your section 151 officer, though, I obviously am concerned about any debt that's not billed on time. And there is an issue there picked up from the swap report that will be followed up on. And I would suggest your committee follow in terms of the recommendation is that we do put in processes and procedures for billing and for following up on debt as well. It was noted in the report that some procedures weren't in place. So from an audit and governance point of view, that's areas that I think you should be concerned about.
Thank you. Councillor Hookway, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've listened with great interest to this debate, and I agree with everything that's been said, but I'm going to put another aspect in it, and that is about the Hexacom software. I had a look at their website this morning. They're a small company, and they're producing a very specific software package. I've had experience of such software packages in the past and such companies, and I think we need to monitor this process of using this software extremely carefully indeed, because we have no idea during this pandemic how this company is going to fare, to put it bluntly. I like the report. I think it's extremely well written, as people have said, and therefore I would like to propose a recommendation that we as a committee accept the findings of this report and the actions that are being taken, and that this committee monitors the progress on these actions at the next A&G meeting. This is something we must keep a very close eye on, in my view. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anybody want to second that? But before I go to that, obviously, Simon, not being a committee member, did make a recommendation regarding the collections procedure. Are you happy to add Simon's recommendation to yours, Councillor Hookway?
Yes, I am, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gazza, I can see a hand up. I'm hoping that's the second.
Yeah, it is, Chair, but I think it's absolutely vital that the A&G do get a further report on how things are going. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda or Debbie, did you get the wording for all of that as you need?
So, Chair, just...
go on, Debbie, sorry. Karen.
I just wanted to confirm, to include to what Councillor Hookway quite clearly set out, do you want to append to that to include improvements to the processes for collection of monies?
I think it was a developer process to the collections.
So So including improvements to the
Well,
developer. Yeah, please.
Can I help? If that's all right. Sorry, Chair. To ensure procedures are in place for the collection of debt.
Okay. So if members are happy with what's been put forward now, do you want me to just run through those two again, Chair, just so we're clear?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I might be paraphrasing slightly, but the proposal was to accept the findings and the actions taken that are set out in the audit report, and to monitor progress of the actions through following subsequent meetings of the Audit and Governance Committee, which will also include to ensure processes are in place for the collection of debt. So if you're all happy with that, I'm seeing if in different faces, but I hope that everyone's happy with that, Chair. I'll move straight to a vote. So members may be aware, for those of you who haven't joined us in most recent meetings, that the green ticks and red crosses are not a reliable source of voting at the moment because of a bug in Zoom. So what I'm going to do is that for those members of the committee who are in support, if you could please raise your electronic hand now.
Don't even do that.
Fred, if you look under the More section on your iPad, you'll see at the top of the options there's something called Raise Hand.
Got it. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. So that's 1, 2, 7, 8. So I have 8 votes for, Chair. So at the moment, with your membership, that is a unanimous approval for that recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And thank you, Ed, for your assistance through that one. On to the next item, item 8, and that is the internal audit plan progress for January 2021. Alistair, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, is it worth sharing my screens? I appreciate our reports.
Yes, please.
To the ones you normally see as committee members. Okay, so this is our progress update report. So you receive one of these each quarter. It's an update on the progress against the annual internal audit plan. The key things to this report is just to update you on the progress against the plan, to highlight significant findings that we've identified through our work, and to notify you of any plan changes. So first of all, if you look on your screens, you see on this page, our page 3, agenda page 27, this just highlights the work that's been completed since your last update. You'll note that a number of audits have received reasonable assurance, and obviously the one that we've been discussing recently, SEALS 106, that was limited assurance. As I mentioned when I demonstrated our report earlier, I would highlight anything of high risk. So the SEAL report did return a medium risk to the authority overall. So hence none of the audits that we've got have identified high risk after we've tested the controls. So there's nothing that I'm reporting in this section here. The next section just contains details on the findings of our limited or no assurance audits. Obviously, you've received a copy of the actual report itself, so hopefully all this information is familiar to you and we've already discussed it. What I would say with any limited or no assurance audit is we do follow up on those assurance areas to make sure the recommendations have been implemented. So I do take, as a committee, you wanted feedback at your next meeting, which I believe is in March. And we would, as again, schedule a piece of work for ourselves to make sure we can undertake and give assurance that those recommendations have been implemented. So that would be some independent assurance for you as a committee. So scrolling down to this page, agenda page 30, our page 6, this just highlights progress on the plan to date. So at the start of the quarter, we had 28% of the plan left to deliver. And so we're broadly on track to deliver the whole plan in year, which, given the fact that we've had COVID and the pressure on officers with grant payments and other things as that, it's been a pretty good achievement, I do believe. We haven't received any feedback questionnaires. So at the end of every audit, we send out a survey to those that we've done the audit with, just to provide some feedback on our process and what we could do to improve. We haven't had any feedback to date on the work. There's not such a big issue. Obviously, we do like to receive feedback, so we do follow up on those. But we will be providing a survey to the senior management team and you as audit committee members in the new financial year to provide a wider view on our service and what you would like and expect from your internal audit service. So moving down onto agenda page 31, our page 7, this just highlights the changes to the audit plan. There have been a number of changes, mainly around pressure on services and because of the increased risks around things that have been going on with COVID, particularly around some of the fraud risks. So those changes are highlighted there to make you aware of those. And then moving finally on to our conclusion section, I think there's just a few things I'd like to highlight here. So CITFA did issue a guidance in November because in a number of local authorities, internal audit staff had been redeployed to provide some support on frontline services. CITFA did make it clear that from a legislative point of view, nothing has changed for internal audit and internal audit should still be happening as intended. I do appreciate the pressures on council resources, can completely understand why there was some redeployment. What the CITFA guide did allow is where insufficient work is done, because again, obviously our annual plan needs to provide sufficient work for us to give an annual opinion, which I normally present to this committee around May, June time. What I can confirm is the work to date for us, there is sufficient work to allow us to produce that annual opinion. So I don't foresee any problems with having to produce a limited scope opinion for you on the state of governance, control and risk. The final point on here, and I think this is obviously quite timely given the conversations around SIL 106, as an audit committee, you are responsible for giving assurance to full council on the state of governance, risk and control in the local authority. You get your source of assurance from various areas, but obviously one of the key areas of assurance you get that independent assurance through the internal audit and the internal audit plan. We are in the process of now pulling our 21-22 audit plan together. After this meeting, I will send all of you some literature just around what's kind of going out in the global economy, the global world in terms of risk, and you might want to reflect on some of that. I appreciate you will also probably have views on risks and priorities in the authority. So what I'd welcome is input from all of you as audit committee members on things that might need to be flagged up to go into our annual plan to give you assurance. So the purpose of internal audit is to give you that assurance. It should be aligned to achievement of objectives. So when you are thinking of things to include, do think in terms of the strategic priorities and the priorities of services and what that means in terms of risk and, as I say, priorities. So if you could let me have your views, that would be greatly appreciated. The final part of our report just goes on to summarise the overall plan for the year and where we are. So a number of these have been reported to you throughout the year previously. This is the current position. So it's broken down between our audit type, the name of the audit, the quarter it was scheduled to be done, current status, whether it's final draft or in progress, and the assurance rating we gave in that audit and the number of recommendations. So that is the current position. I'm happy to take any questions that members may have.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard, please.
Thank you, Chair. On page 27, just on the audit area, it says housing gas compliance and it says reasonable. I mean, that raises alarms with me. So could you just quantify that for me, please?
Yep. So in terms of our audit plan for the year, the plan that was presented to you, and I think there is a link further up on the covering report for this, will take you to the plan report. So I just come up to here. This link will take you to the plan report, and that will give you an outline of the scope of what these audits would cover. Now, we do report to you as an audit committee by exception. So what we gave gas compliance was reasonable assurance. That is reasonable assurance that the controls in place should manage the risks in terms of gas safety in the council houses that you own and maintain. So yes, it's not substantial, but it is reasonable. So for us, it's not an adverse opinion. I can provide further details on the scope and information on the audit if you so wish.
Can I come back, Chair?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, that would be helpful. But just, I mean, obviously, we like to think that we're one of the really best councils in the area. And how does this compare to other councils? I mean, have you done any comparisons with other councils on the gas compliance?
Yes, we have. Obviously, a number of local authorities did sell off their housing stock. So in terms in our partnership, there's only so many that do have a maintained housing stock. But as a service provider, we do have some housing associations and arm length management companies that we provide services for. So we are seeing what they're doing, and we do try and share best practice where we can around those areas. In terms of how you compare, obviously at the moment with COVID, there have been some restrictions in gaining access to properties, so it is more of a difficult situation at the moment. But in terms of comparison, broadly in line with the other organisations that we're seeing, I wouldn't say there's too much dissimilar things that we're seeing. There have been some authorities that we've looked at probably 3 or 4 years ago where the arrangements were quite poor and needed significant improvement, but they have brought their act up. And so I wouldn't say East Devon is out of line with other authorities.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think it might also be useful actually touching on sort of that report as well, as obviously where limited and no assurance comes to committee. But I think it'd be useful if those other reports could also at least come to members or be saved in a central place so that they could just be viewed, and then obviously if there is anything that jumps out, that could then be brought forward to committee. I don't know if that's possible, Alistair.
It's a good question. I think as a company, we're looking at how and what information we can share with senior management and members on a more regular basis, so you get things in a more timely manner. Obviously, our difficulty has always been we're on a separate network to you, and where we can put stuff that you can gain access to. So I think this will be something we'll probably have to discuss with East Devon in terms of whether there can be a space where things can be deposited, and then you guys can have access to it from there. But that we're certainly happy to take that conversation forward. Although, as I said, longer term, we are looking at how we report to you, because in an ideal world, what we would like is you as members of the audit committee and senior management to be able to drill into the information that gives you the overview and drill down to the detail of, what the scope of the review was, what controls were looked at, how good those controls were operating, and it's all there in real time. That's where we would ideally like to be, but that does require some investment. So, but happy to look at something in the short term.
Okay, thanks. And the audit committee benchmarking, I think, would be an interesting one, at least to come to the committee, just because it's about us.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that can be factored into a future meeting, please. Otherwise, I can't see any other hands up, and therefore I'll take that as we are happy to note the report. Thank you. So on to agenda item 9, which is the Strata ICT Audit Summary 2019-20 by the Devon Audit Partnership. And I think we've got Craig with us to talk on that item.
Thank you, Chair. Is it worthwhile just giving a very, very quick overview of who I am?
Yes, please.
My name's Craig Moody. I'm Senior Auditor for IT for Devon Audit Partnership. I've had an IT audit hat for the past 10 years, although I have 30 years audit experience and therefore quite regularly get dragged off the ICT subject area. This is the 5th year that DAP have provided the IT audit to Strata, effectively working as an internal audit service, not external. The report, Chair, if you could forgive me for not sharing my screen. Bizarrely, I've got a few IT issues here as an IT auditor. The report is relatively short, and I think I can probably summarise it verbally.
Yep.
Okay, so in terms of the work that is conducted, last year we kind of looked at strategy, which is how the service is being delivered and the direction of travel. The IT operations, how service is delivered. Project management, which obviously is an essential component in delivering to the 3 partners. And then obviously, vitally important, cybersecurity. Strategically, I said in the report back in 15-16 that actually the approach that was taken by the partners was fairly innovative and different. This said, in my opinion, it's been highly successful. The Gartner report in 2019, so Gartner being a body of expertise in terms of IT delivery, was basically outlining that due to the financial constraints that we're living in, or the actual lack of money altogether, and that not changing, partnering and sharing was the model to choose. So in that respect, Strata is 4 or 5 years down the line. In terms of that strategic delivery of the original business case and business cases moving forward, savings forecasts have been exceeded, so the financial benefit to the partners has been achieved or exceeded. Business plans that are currently written are of a high quality. Of particular note is the granular nature of it, so the use of metrics by which the service delivery can be measured, and those discussions can continue. A lot of business plans are quite theoretical, so the degree of granularity and ability to measure against the given service is something that actually benefits the partners and Strata alike. Biggest risk strategically is the fact that there are 3 masters, and getting the balance correct in terms of delivering the needs of the 3 partners, and also in trying to maintain a direction of travel in terms of development and services delivered. That remains a challenge, as it would be, but obviously in terms of the risk, the benefit of the delivery model, of which there are many, but the benefit of any delivery model, once chosen, is to continue and optimize that delivery model. So the key points of my report were, obviously, COVID has impacted service delivery quite considerably. I know one of the partners that didn't have a lot of home working had to, within a matter of weeks, go to, I think it was 86% home working. So the way that IT is delivered was facilitated by the desktop that was provided. So the virtual desktop, that technology that Strata was delivering, actually helped future-proof to some degree, or at least allowed services to continue and IT to be delivered. This said, I think some of the lessons learned, I'm talking about this year now, but some of the lessons learned are that the risk environment has changed. As new ways of working are introduced, their delivery and also their security present challenges, and that should be noted in terms of risk overall to Strata and obviously the partners. Commercial opportunities I noted were recognised, but again, in terms of where we are with the COVID situation and the uncertainties and possibility that actually the requirements of the individual partners will change and the way they look at service delivery will change, that will obviously impact on Strata and what technologies and solutions they are delivering. Project management, again, is pivotal to delivering new projects. Extensive work was done on that. Unfortunately, whilst the project management solution has been adopted, again, COVID has got in the way. So to embed that and to refine that has taken a bit of a back burner. Strata has purchased a new ITSM, so that's an IT service management solution. Moving forward, that will enable them to handle incidents, events, to track changes and the likes, all of these core functions that IT must deliver. That again has taken a bit of a back burner moving forward, but again, that is something I'll be looking at in this 4th quarter. In terms of cyber security, cyber is just a word, it's nothing new. It's really about the vulnerabilities that impact the network, the delivery to deliver service, and the data that is held within those facilities. We use the government Cyber Essentials scheme to conduct the audit and to make the assessment. This is based on the original one, which is CREST. So the various things have changed, but we tend to use the technical granular version. In terms of overall opinions, so the strategy and IT operations were considered of a good standard. Project management and solution delivery, so service to line and projects, that's delivery of new services, were considered of a good standard, not least because the amount of work that has been done to try and approach project management, which remains challenging to any organisation. Cybersecurity was considered of a good standard. Again, that is continually evolving and adapting, but in terms of the baseline, which is what needs to be maintained, I always use the case study of the NHS attack, WannaCry. If they had been fulfilling Cyber Essentials and actually done their patching, the attack couldn't have been vectored at them. So there's a change in risk environment. Last year, were generally speaking, the delivery, the security and the strategy was all of a good standard. And that's really my summation of the report. Although obviously I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. I can see a tick from Councillor Twiss. I'll take that as a hand.
I was wondering if you'd spot that, Chairman, actually. Should I change that to a hand? Oh, gosh. There we are.
It's all right, we've got you anyway.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It would be tempting to use this report for something else, which for me isn't appropriate to an audit and governance committee meeting. So I just want to make the point, in my opinion, this is clearly a strategic document rather than an operational one. It's very clear that Strata is delivering to the three partners in the business exactly as we envisaged at the start of this project some years ago. And I take partial blame for instigating that. And I think it's actually exceeding what we thought originally would happen. The global desktop that has been rolled out, in effect meaning you can operate from wherever you are, which is exactly what we're doing here today, is vindication of how important that was to allow for flexible working and mobile working, and that was right from day one. So as councillors, staff, and most importantly, the members of the public could access East Devon District Council services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I say during the pandemic, it's been critical for the success. I wouldn't say it's been seamless. It hasn't been seamless, but crikey, it's been almost seamless as far as operations go. So I'm happy with this report, that it's a fair reflection of the state of affairs. I would caution that, however, inevitably, as an ex-auditor, I actually caution that with one thing, is in that we did have an operational issue, which is well documented within the council, but I wouldn't take that as being something that's going to happen frequently. These things happen within IT. Craig, you will know that every business you're dealing with is constantly under attack, both outside and inside, whether by accident or design. So I'm just saying that I think there's no place for complacency. I think Strata generally is doing an excellent job on behalf of the taxpayers of Exeter, East Devon, Teignbridge. But vigilance has to be the key word for me going forward, particularly as we now are, I wouldn't say totally reliant, we're heavily reliant on IT, our systems and everything else. So I think I welcome the report. It's a fantastic document to have, and I just hope to see further progress next year. Cybersecurity, yeah, that's the big deal. Absolutely right. And you only need to look at the number of businesses that have been hit down and had to shut for months. Often can't maintain their operations. We have business continuity, we have disaster recovery, and the most important thing is we service the needs of our customers, people in East Devon. Thanks, Chairman, very much, and thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor King, please.
Thank you, Chair. And my apologies, I'm not risking going onto video because our bandwidth has taken a knock over the past few weeks. I think the EU has not got enough and it's sequestered some of mine. I wanted to say that I think what Strata is actually achieving amongst 3 different councils, and I think is excellent. I think it's a fantastic performance. In particular, I'm so impressed by the way in which they rise to new changing demands so quickly. It's so unlike an outsourcing company, which would actually start turning a profit every time there's a slight change anywhere. So I really do admire the arrangements that are in place between the councils and Strata. I note also what Councillor Twiss has remarked on, and I think there's a very good balance in what he said. But I do want to lift the lid on something. You mentioned that there's a new management system coming on board. Now, obviously, there are so many layers in systems such as these that I don't know at which level the management system goes on to. Never mind. What I would like to highlight, though, is that something that did come to light in the discussions about the hiccup we had the other month, over several months, was that I think Strata excels within the internal services delivered to the different councils and across the councils. And the problem arose by, as soon as they had to open the door onto different platforms for councillors, so that you had Microsoft, Apple, Google, and even Linux coming into play. And of course, those different brands, different animals, competitive animals, they do compete between each other, playing market games to deprive too much migration to another supplier. For that very reason, they want to be slightly incompatible. Now, we pick up the difficult consequences of that. It's to do with system compatibility. Meanwhile, those different suppliers are also doing their background housekeeping updates, which aren't often sort of made very apparent. And that undermines quite often a lot of assumptions that are made as suppliers such as Strata will stitch the different applications together back to back and so on. So I think everyone understands what I'm talking about. And so if I can just give that a sort of a general group name of system compatibility, I think it's quite important that we can have some vigilance about keeping an eye on it to avoid problems arising. It needs monitoring, and of course it will be a balance of how much effort to monitor that last possible % of change versus the mainstream changes. Can I hand it, Chair, back to Craig to make a comment on that? I would like to see more attention given to it. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Councillor King. Very, very quickly, the management software that I talk out really is if you ring the service desk, if they process an incident, how they manage change, which I'll allude to in a second. So it's basically a little bit of software to help the administrative practice and process and introduce more workflow that would increase capacity through efficiency. So that was the ITSM. So the software, it's based on best practice, ITIL, and it's something that will hopefully enhance things moving forward. The word assumptions is a nice, simple, but very important word to use. And when I talked about the control environment changing, the use of hosted systems, so obviously I have more clients than Strata. I see things, I learn things, I'm constantly learning. So assumptions have come into play in the marketplace. The change to hosted systems, the interconnection of conflicting technologies has come into play, and more so, and it's more focused as people strive to continue to deliver services in circumstances that we find ourselves. Part and parcel, I've spoken with Lawrence. We have a set IT audit plan, which was set, I think, at the beginning of the year or the financial year. However, it would be wrong to stick rigidly to that because, as I say, the risks have changed. So the change management, where I was looking at how are they enhancing the new software, the new service desk software, I will now be revisiting all their processes, especially change, which is vital. So change management. I'll be looking at that and trying to consider their existing working practices in the light of what has happened and what the risks are.
Thank you. Councillor King, are you happy with that response?
I'm happy with that. Thank you very much, Craig. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for the report, Craig. And I echo the comments that the last two councillors have made. I'm not a very good technical person. I'm more of the old slate and chisel sort of person. And I do struggle with technology. But as has been said, is that obviously we rely on technology even more now. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But are you happy that there are enough safety guards built in that that the system's not going to be? I mean, I use the terminology hacked for a better word. Are you happy that Strata's got enough systems in place to avert that?
So you're quite right. It is complex and ever changing. Personally speaking, I don't like using IT at home because I have enough of it. So I'm a little bit with you. I'd rather have a chisel and slate personally, to be honest, quite often. Basically, it's about layers of control. So it's essential that we talk about change. So how do you change something? What steps do you take? What should you consider? Change is a very dangerous area. 80% of outages and things occur following failed changes, and you could apply that to security incidents as well. The security Cyber Essentials is the one that's advocated by the government. I've actually talked a company called, or an organisation called Crest were highly involved with creating that. I've actually spoken with the chief exec of that company, or president, or whatever his title is, they change. And he was talking about how on a granular basis, so in the fine detail of things, and how it was working and how that was important, we used that technical iteration of the scheme to assess how effective Strata are. I know Robin, the security officer, over a period of time in different guises in terms of different organisations and things. I know him to be quite anarchy about things, which is always good. So in terms of how secure are you, you are, a Strata are meeting their baseline core obligations, and then you have to react moving forward as things change. I know Robin is in receipt of regional information in terms of what is happening. So alerts are issued, and constantly reading what new threats have been, what attacks there have been, and what the issues are. So in terms of somebody overseeing your security, Strata are providing a good service. It's also about what if. So there will be a range of complex circumstances in which you may be hacked, there may be problems, there may be service outages. What Strata do, according to what the guidance within Cyber Essentials do, is do stuff that stops WannaCry, what happened to a lot of the health service providers and things. They're very basic, but actually they eliminate the majority of attacks, because complex attacks cost money. So if the Chinese government want to hack Strata, they can hack Strata. That is not likely. At worst, you might have cyber criminals looking to exploit. So all the data you hold is a financial value in terms of crime. You can actually get a price on the black web for certain aspects of personal data. It is a marketplace. So the controls that are put in are at an appropriate level to mitigate the risks from the likely attackers that Strata will actually encounter. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Just coming back to the audit report itself, Craig, obviously it's good. Well, I assume it's good that there's good standard ratings given on the audit opinions.
Yeah.
But we don't have the definitions of your standards. Is good the sort of top rating, or are there good, excellent, and amazing?
Right. Okay, so they've changed. Forgive me, I won't tell you what new ones. So based on the standard that this report was based, there is high standard, of which in my last 10 years I've given once, but I think that was only because they gave me cakes and tea, and they looked after me well. So I tend not to, and also I would be nervous about it. The area is so complicated. There are so many variations on a theme. There are so many complications that to give a high standard in terms of IT, you know, high standard banks should be achieving what I would consider a high standard, but they constantly fall down. You know, the health services got archaic infrastructure that will create a headache moving forward. So in terms of where we are, good standard is comfortable. So good is, it's not bulletproof, it's not gold standard, because you have to have bucket loads of cash to achieve that. Good is appropriate to your resources, the threats, and what you're looking to deliver. So there is an element about service delivery that comes into the work that I do. Below that is improvements required. So there would be either a high number of relatively low level weaknesses that would build towards the fact that actually it created an overall higher risk, or there could be one or two very high risks that would need mitigating. So there was an imminent threat to the organisation that needed to be mitigated. There's then fundamental weaknesses, but you don't want to go there. I've given a few reports about that, but I've tended to be hauled up in front of people. You can't say this. It's a very, that's where you wouldn't want to be. Certain health trusts, I hate to beat the health service up because we know they're amazing, particularly the frontline staff. However, their infrastructure, the back office stuff, some of the stuff would be fundamental weaknesses because of the lag behind and the need to keep up with things. So strata are where you would want it to be. If I give a high standard, it would probably be a lie, because as I say, it's about being appropriate to the level of resources that you can and should apply.
Thank you. I think that's sensible. And the other point is that obviously this has come to us as a very high level report, and understandably so. There are clearly reports that sit sort of underneath this. I don't know if they come under those three headings. It's just a wonder if we can see those as members outside of a committee, unless obviously something has risen that it needs to be brought to committee, but just so we can get that oversight as well.
When I've re-looked at it, normally my reports are quite verbose and long-winded, and I think potentially I'll need to come back to you if I could possibly do so via Simon. So the level, off the top of my head, I think some of the work accrued into the year, and in terms of the work, the coverage, a lot of it was around project and things, which are not necessarily, it was a lot of clarifications and things and working alongside as an internal audit sort of consultancy function. I think that's why it's very clipped. What it might be useful for you to look at is the previous year. If I try and provide a bundle through Simon to you, if you've then got any further questions, please feel free to come back to me.
Yeah, I'm happy with that, Simon.
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. I suppose my only question to Craig, or I could ask it outside, is how technical they get and how high risk if they got out into the public.
The only thing with IT reports in terms of public domain is that yes, there is a risk that you're giving somebody something to tag into. And despite the best will in the world, because there are so many means of attacking organisations, sometimes the detailed reports would be problematic and create an element of risk. So in terms of being part one, yes, there would be some elements within the more granular report. I think the previous year report was made part two off the top of my head. I think there were granular details in there that potentially would have been of interest or would be attacker. So again, any reports, bundles, I'll liaise with Simon, and then we'll sort of identify if there are any risks associated with that and how they should be treated.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think, I understand that there are certain elements there that need to be more sensitive than others. Other than that, I can't see any other hands up. So I believe we're happy to note that report and then move on to the next item, which is from Grant Thornton with the audit progress report and sector update, please.
Thanks, Chair. So if I take this one to start, it's a fairly short report from us this time on the agenda. Members will remember at the last audit committee, we brought to you our more extensive audit findings report, but at that point noted that there were a number of areas that we were still working on with officers in respect of the 2019-20 audit. Our report in front of you today on page 4 of our report, which is 47 of the committee's report pack, on the left-hand side sets out those areas that we reported remained in progress, and on the right-hand side reported on the 14th of January those areas that were still in progress. So as you can see, there have been some areas that have come off that list, but there are still a number of areas where the work is still ongoing. On that list on the right-hand side, a couple of those items have since come off that list since drafting this report and circulating it for papers. But some of the larger areas, especially around the valuation of council dwellings, and also the points we discussed last committee around the accounting treatment of some of the disposals and the fact that that was going to take some time for officers to work through the accounts, those are still outstanding, and so we're unable to review that work until we've received the final responses on those items. Over the page, we also have other responsibilities as your external auditor in respect of the certification of some of your claims and returns. Those relate to housing benefit subsidy on behalf of the Department for Work and Pensions, and also the housing capital or pooling of housing capital receipts return on behalf of MHCLG. In terms of the housing benefit subsidy, that work is underway. The council had agreed an extension to that reporting timetable with the Department for Work and Pensions, so we're working to that updated timetable. The pooling return, again, we're waiting on responses to our final queries on that before we're able to conclude that work and return our report to MHCLG. As I said, it's a fairly short and self-explanatory report, so I wasn't going to say too much more on it other than to open up for questions.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions they would like to ask?
Thank you,
Councillor
Chair.
Gazard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just a question to ask. When is the Queen's Drive issue going to be completed? Audit that's on the right hand side going to be completed, please?
Yeah, that's I'll take that one, Jason. That's a question over the values that are recorded in the asset register and the and therefore in the gross cost and gross depreciation. We have a difference of opinion with John over how they should be shown. It will have no effect on the balance sheet or the revenue account. It's just the note to the accounts we think is overstated cost and depreciation, and we're waiting for a further response on that.
You've got no idea when that will be completed then?
I think Simon,
Simon,
you
you're
might
best
have
place.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. So just to sort of clarify Steve's response, Councillor Gazard, I mean, it's basically, it's not a question of how much to spend, what's been spent, or a question of the project itself. It's about the clarification or classification of expense to how we've treated capital and the elements of capital. So it's no, it's more of a technical argument going on between us and Grant Thornton, but it has no bearing on the project itself or the actual expenditure on the project, if that's what's your concern. I've got a view, and I just need to convince Steve that my view is correct.
Yeah, no, that's right, Simon. That's exactly what it is. It's just a technical interpretation, and it's not material. It just, we need to clarify exactly what the treatment should be.
Thank you for that. The only reason I asked, Simon, was that obviously, as you're aware, the whole issue of Queen's Drive is going to scrutiny. I didn't know whether this would have any relationship to the scrutiny. Thank you.
Can't see any other hands, so I will take that as we're happy to note and move on to the next item, which is the full risks review, November-December 2020. Simon, I've got you down noted as speaking on this one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Nothing to add, really. I mean, members should be fully aware of the report by now in terms of format and how it's presented. Comes to you twice a year. The report highlights 2 operational risks in terms of high, but again, I think won't come as a surprise in terms of LED and its predicament in terms of the pandemic and the cost of in terms of the council plan, in terms of how that's been held back by the pandemic. But reports are coming forward to next cabinet in terms of how we might address that particular issue. And I think reports will also come forward on LED, as you know, as chair of the forum, in terms of implications there. So there is a lot of information. Happy to take any questions, or if they're very detailed about a particular service, I might need to refer to another service or strategic lead.
Thanks, Simon. Something just to raise internally, I've noticed there's still quite a few that are reading like they've been just rolled forward. References to the Knoll are still in there, Deputy CEO, so it's just a reminder to members, officers who are completing those to make sure they've updated them, please. But I did see that the comments at the bottom did seem to be very up to date. several references to the ongoing pandemic, which I'd expect to see. So there was good progress in that respect. I won't go through them in detail now. Has anybody got any comments else they'd like to raise on that, please? I'll take that silence as we are happy to note, and we can move forward, which then takes us on to item 12, which is the RIPA update. I've received an apology from, I've got Anita actually with us. Anita, did you want to speak on this one?
I will do, Chair. I'm just waiting for my camera to. We're all having IT problems today. The system is not doing well. I'll try and keep still, which I think helps. Yes, apology from me. So the RIPA update is correct as it is. We've taken no actions that are relevant for RIPA purposes. But at the last meeting, the committee asked for an explanatory report to come through on RIPA, which I have drafted, but we've held for a moment because what Henry also wanted me to do was update the policy, and he and I had a little feature of remote working misunderstanding, I think, and I haven't updated the policy. So I've started the policy update, and our intention, if it works for you, Chair, is to bring it back to the next meeting, so you'll get the policy with the explanatory report at the same time. There seemed little point bringing them separately. Better for you to have both together. And my apologies for the misunderstanding. Unfortunately, it slipped through the net for us.
Thank you, Anita. I can't see any hands, so I'll take that as we are happy to move forward on to agenda item 13, which is the audit and governance forward plan. Obviously, we've got a lot on next March by the looks of it. But otherwise, are committee members happy with the forward plan as it sits? Would like to raise anything? Councillor Hookway, please. You're muted.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Yes, just carrying on for what I proposed earlier on about the S106 SIL internal audit report that we said we voted that we would closely monitor that. So I would like to see that issue and the Exacom software on the forward report plan for the next meeting, please.
Yeah, I think that matches obviously what we've said. So if that can be added to the plan, please. Councillor Gazzard.
Yeah, I was just going to raise that. Thank you, Chair. And obviously the issue that we raised at the beginning of the meeting needs to go on there.
Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Kago, is that the same comment?
It's on the same subject matter, yes. And I would like to ask some further questions about fleet management to Simon Davey, having received a reply from him about the question I asked at the last audit governance meeting, if I may, Chair.
I don't know if that's going to be best to sit just when we've had the report. I don't know how well it sits under the forward plan at this time. That's all. I don't want to.
Well, I think it's relevant, Chair. I think it's quite relevant.
Okay.
I think it's quite relevant because I don't think I have any other forum to bring this to the attention to this committee and the wider council and the wider public. And I will ask the question. I did receive an email from Simon Davey about the vehicle being used to drive home to Teignmouth from wherever it's based, whether it's Sidmouth or Exmouth. And the reply I got was that it was a member of senior management team or someone from on a duty roster. Now, if they're driving home to Teignmouth and a senior management team, they're using public money to drive backwards and forwards to work. And I don't really feel that's good use of public money. If they're doing a duty over a weekend or a night or 1 week out of 4, that may be acceptable. But to drive that vehicle every day backwards and forwards to Teignmouth, in my mind, they are getting a benefit in kind. And if they're a senior management team member, they're probably on a pretty good salary. So how is that fair to the rest of the people? Furthermore, every vehicle that is driven home by an operative takes up car parking spaces in residential areas. It's not conducive to the plans for the environment. These people could cycle to any compound, whether it's in Teignmouth or Exmouth. And if these senior managers who live in Exeter and Teignmouth, I'm sure they could use their own cars, because no thing for a call out is an emergency. It's probably not life threatening. So, you know, they could probably use their own cars and claim the fuel if that's the case. But, you know, and then when I saw the attachment, which was a form that members of staff had to sign, it clearly said that there is no capacity to park these vehicles in our compounds. Well, if that's the case, then we need new compounds, because surely these vehicles should not be used for travel to and from work. Thank you.
Thank you. I wonder if this is the policy itself that's at question here, and whether it becomes a scrutiny issue. Obviously, it sits with us under if the policy is being followed, which obviously we have that policy, so maybe it's being followed, but the question of whether it's an appropriate policy might come under that committee. Summer, I don't know if you want to add.
I concur with what you're saying, Chair, and I'm quite happy to agree with what you're saying. I think it needs to be looked at.
If I can come back, Chair, just one point of clarity, I suppose. It may have been confusing in my email, but it didn't mean a member of the senior management team. It was a team leader we were talking about in terms of street scene. But I think the wider point, the valid issues raised. Several years ago, the policy over use of vehicle fleet management and the decision that officers can, if they use them as part of their duties, it made financial sense and operational sense for them to be able to take them home and then start work from using them and finish work with using them. But that can be looked at in terms of, I think it depends how you want to take it, Chair. It could either go straight to scrutiny to be considered in terms of the policy, or perhaps if we've decided that we're going to swap to look at fleet management as an issue, a good remit for that could be value for money, best use of company assets, and encompass all of that together to see whether our policy does meet those sort of requirements, or whether there are improvements that could be made. It can go either way, I guess, Chair. Perhaps Councillor Cahill.
Yeah, perhaps Councillor Cahill, have you got thoughts on?
Yes, I'm quite happy with the response from Simon. You know, I'm just concerned that as a council, we're trying to promote good health, good well-being, protecting the environment, you know, carbon neutrality, you know, the ecological emergency, that all these things that we talk about, yet we're not actually following our own ethos. So it doesn't really look good to try and set an example to the public when we're actually not setting an example to the public. Now, I fully appreciate if vehicles are needed for a specific duty task, but to actually use them ad infinitum for employees to drive home, park in the street over Christmas, take up 2 parking spaces with a big pickup, when they could quite clearly be left in a compound where they're secure and locked up. I think that's the way forward, but I think, you know, it needs to be looked at in greater detail, perhaps.
Yeah, I think there's something we'll take forward then between maybe you, me, Simon, and Alistair, just on how to work out what exactly we're asking for the swap report to do, and then move that forward. Councillor Hayward, please.
Thank you, Chair. And then this is one of these sort of issues where, again, we need to be clear about what's involved. If members of staff and as members, we're not involved in the day-to-day contract negotiations and terms of employment. I used to run a transport fleet. Some of my drivers had within their terms and conditions that they had use of the van. There's an inland revenue payment just for that. There's, you know, but that's not an issue for members. That's an issue for the head of paid service and various managers. So, but to cover the point you've already touched on, yes, I'd like to understand exactly how this fits in to audit and governance, so that we don't encroach upon the duties and responsibilities of East Devon as an employer. But Councillor Cahill makes a very, very valid point. You know, perhaps we should install 60 bike racks at Blackdown House. You know, if we're going to put our money where our mouth is, then we all cycle into Blackdown House. No one needs to drive. The final point is, once you and the person's names have identified how you want to take this forward. It's really just an offer of help. I used to be a fleet manager when I was, a transport manager for a haulage firm. So if there's any particular things that you need help with, I mean, it was a while ago, but the principle's still the same. I'm more than happy to sort of offer any help and support I can from a fleet management point of view, whether that's your car fleet, your vehicle fleet, your HGV fleet. I've got a bit of background in that, but it's just an offer, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Cahill raises a very good point, and thanks to Simon for your response. But I think it should all form part of the swap audit. I think that will be the easiest way.
Yeah, I think that's right. If we can get that added to the forward plan, I would say put it under TBC, because I wouldn't want to commit anybody to an 18th of March date on that. I think that would be appropriate. But based on that, then, if we're all happy with the forward plan, I can't see a hand, so I'll take that as happiness. And that brings our meeting to an end. And I'd like to thank everyone, including any members of the public watching online, for taking part. However, can I just remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live, and until then, your comments will be live to the public.